Hey everybody, welcome back to the Honey and Absinthe channel. We are your hosts. I'm Vincent, a background designer for animation.
And I'm Janet, the ex-Disney artist turned independent creator. And in this video, I'm going to show you how I draw hawks. I'll share some tips, tricks on how I do these inks, and by the end of the video, you'll learn how to be a little bit of a better artist.
All right, let's get into it. All right, so thumbnails.
Yeah, I always start these commissions with a thumbnail. You should always start with a thumbnail, otherwise you don't know what you're doing. And I started with a not so dynamic pose and jumped to a much more dynamic pose. And you can see I even kind of drew the hand a little bit out before I really draw it out on
This is your prep phase. You're preparing for the whole entire composition, right?
Yeah, so once I have the thumbnail done, I know exactly what I'm going to draw. I'm using a coal erase pencil here, and I like to use these pencils because I think they give the drawing a really nice look, because you can kind of see it in the end. Yeah. It's nicer than just using like a gray graphite pencil. I think graphite can look dirty sometimes.
Especially when your palm's always rubbing on it. It's wow. Great. Did you shoot reference or something? Like, wow.
Not really. So I've been doing this a lot for the past, I don't know, 5 months since I quit my job at Disney. So I'm at a point where I can
whip it out?
Yeah, come out, whip it out. Come out with these poses really naturally.
Nice.
But as you can see, I used like a photo of my own hand and some reference photos for the wings in order to get things that I do struggle with. So instead of trying to figure it all out in my head, I just took a photo of my hand.
And these are really quick things, sketches that you're doing. Something like this takes like 2 days? A day and a half?
Yeah, for the drawing alone, it might take 2 days. And it's because I'm doing a lot of things. I'm doing like YouTube videos and stuff like that. And it's nice to take your time.
Yeah. That way, when you finally get into the inking part, all you have to worry about is making beautiful strokes.
Yeah, and plussing it, which means just not following the line exactly, but making it a little bit better, because you're instead of just drawing it twice, you're making it slightly better every time you draw it.
Yeah.
And I'm going in and doing a lot of texture work for collar and for the wings and stuff like that. It's something that I noticed is a great opportunity to do when it comes to Hawks, because this is, I think, my second time drawing him.
Yeah, it's the texturing that you did on the wings it's so lush.
Yeah.
I remember you telling me when you first started getting into texturing, because you told me that it's something that you don't usually do.
Yeah.
And you're not really comfortable with it. And now I think you're starting to get comfortable with it.
Yeah, I'm starting to know where it's too much to add too much texture and where it's kind of nice. So I always like texturing animals, for example, because of the fur and the feathers and everything. With people, it's harder. But I'm starting to know how to do it with like clothing, to really use the wrinkles of the clothing to add texture, or like facial hair and that kind of thing.
You are so warm. I can see it. Look at the folds. Like, look at the thick and thins. Like, man.
Yeah, and here I am really trying to design out the dark shadow shape. The idea is like the light coming from above him, and it's like this really epic, like he's in mid-flight in the air kind of
looking
pose.
all suave. Yeah.
So the first time I painted him, I think I didn't do his dark shadow shapes very well. It ended up just kind of being a big mass of black. So instead, this time around, I knew that I wanted to make these shapes in the light versus the shadow really interesting to look at.
Nice. And you're designing the lights and the darks for the boots. Everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere. I'm realizing that if you don't constantly think as you ink, especially for things like this, it's easy to just cover it all in black.
Yeah, you don't want to go in autopilot.
No.
I remember my illustration teacher, she would say that all the time. You know, like, you can't go on autopilot. It'll show. A lot of teachers can see it.
Yeah.
A lot of professionals can too.
Yeah. So here I'm going in and toning all the light areas so that it's not too contrasty. I used to just leave it completely white, the white of the paper, but I noticed your eye starts to dance everywhere and it doesn't have a true focal point if you do that. Yeah. So I just knock back these highlights with a little bit darker ink.
Yeah, it looks great.
Yeah.
You're creating too much contrast if you leave it, and that's why it feels like there's too much going on.
I think when you're inexperienced, you like that contrast, because I definitely did, but you should really be careful of where your contrast is when you're doing these.
Yeah, it's about leading the eye. Right?
And I'm doing the same thing actually with this darker tone.
With just a lighter value.
Yeah, so I'm designing out the shadow shapes and where I want the light to be. So previously, even like the illustration before this, I would fill it completely in with just like the darker tone. But I'm now realizing, like, even with like lighter grays, you should always design the shape of it. So you're never, I was so exhausted after this piece because I used so much brain power.
So story time, everybody. Janet finished this drawing in about 2.5 days.
Yeah.
Finished it around like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And we hung out for a couple hours and she just knocked out at 7.
Yeah,
she just knocked out.
Fell asleep.
Yeah.
And I think I didn't wake up till like 16 hours later. I don't even know, but I was so tired after this piece. And
but it really shows though.
Yeah, I mean, when you're doing something where you're really focusing on your energy, you'd be surprised how much a drawing takes out of you. Here I am designing the background of this piece, and I didn't want to just fill it completely in with black, so I made that like dynamic diagonal shape across the back.
Yeah.
It complements his pose, and here
the yellow looks really great with all this black. Yeah.
I had kind of planned in my head that I wanted it to be that striking. Here, I am using acrylic ink for the wings. And something that I learned previously is I have been using watercolor a lot before, but here I chose to use acrylic ink because I'm using Sumi ink and it's not a permanent ink for the black lines underneath. The acrylic ink actually seals the ink underneath a little bit.
Smart. It's smart. So if you were to use watercolor, you'd be loosening up the Sumi ink, which is no good.
It'll smear.
Yeah, but now instead you're kind of retaining all these beautiful brush strokes and sealing it with this red almost.
Yeah, with gouache and watercolor too, you might have a tendency to cover the line, but with this red ink, it's actually a little bit transparent, so all the hard work I did underneath really comes through.
Yeah, so Sumi ink, acrylic ink.
I think I invented it. If not, I don't know, let me know. So here, I'm going in with some finishing white ink. I am fixing the background a little bit because I wanted a better shape for it. And here, you're actually helping me.
Yeah, this was my idea, to really make these feathers pop, to give at least one side of it a rim light.
Right.
And now they could really read, you know?
You did one for me. I was like, oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, it's hard to explain. Like, I'm just trying to be like, oh, you should add a rim layer to the wings.
Like this.
Like this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that looks great. We should do it. And that's how we kind of team up. I play a little bit of art director.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, it's fun.
Because sometimes when you've been drawing something for like 10 hours, you can't see it straight. It's nice to have another artist to let you know. So that's what the finished commission looks like. I packed and shipped this off, and then I actually scanned it beforehand, and now I'm working on digitizing it into a print.
Nice. So there's a lot of work that you got to do in terms of lassoing and preparing layers.
Yeah. So I lassoed everything, put everything on separate layers, color layers, and now I'm adjusting and picking out the tones for him. And I didn't want it to just be like exactly the colors of HAWKS in the show. I wanted to have a little bit more design to it. So I gave everything a little bit more of like a reddish tone to it. I don't always know what color combinations that I want when I go and do these prints because I'm winging it for the most part. It's a little bit of an experiment. So eventually I chose complementary colors like red in the front, green in the back. And now I'm actually erasing out this multiply layer on top here and to add the highlights back in. And it really separates HAWKS from the background because I mean, it's in the original and it's nice to take the time to do it.
Yeah, definitely.
And
you really want to add that stuff to the print too.
Yeah. And here I'm adding some highlights to the hair and as you can see the eyes and everything else too, and the jacket. And this is something that, you know, you can only really do digitally because I use the white of the paper to do this.
But you get all this nuance from the inking, from the actual ink drawing.
Yeah, because I'm using the actual ink underneath, so it has texture that a digital print piece wouldn't have. And I'm going all over and I'm doing it for his pants and for his shoes. and for his gloves.
Yeah.
And
we talk about this all the time, that like digital art and traditional art, it's all just a tool.
Yeah, and I'm pretty much just trying to balance the digital with the traditional.
Yeah.
So I'm adding a little bit of highlight here and there and gradients where it needs it, but not overdoing it because I want the traditional ink to come through, even though you're buying the digital version.
You get more accents, right?
Yeah, so here is basically like the accenting part, kind of like when I add the white ink traditionally. I'm going in and adding like the last finishing touches, details where it needs to be, especially focusing on the face because that's where all the detail needs to be. You're staring directly into his face.
Yeah. Oh, looks great.
Yeah.
I love all his detailing in the hair.
Yeah, and as you can see, it's not that much. Like,
No,
I'm
it's
not
not.
painting it. I'm just adding highlights here and there, and here knocking some of his hair back, and that's really all you need.
Yeah.
And here is the finished print. If you would like to pick up this print, head to honeyandabsinthe.com. We also have merch.
And if you like what we do here, leave a, like, comment, subscribe over there, jingle our bells and buttons.
And if you would like to watch more drawing videos, check out these other ones.
Wow.
And don't forget to dare to dream.